In this video, I'm going to give you designs for different types of armor through the different periods and techs of HOI4, allowing you to have solid designs that work in any vanilla game and are fully Iron Man compatible. There are place markers for any you may want in order to come back quickly. Let's get going. Light tanks are fast and cheaper than the alternatives, but overall lack the raw stats and piercing of medium and heavies. They're probably the best to make in single player because AI rarely makes strong tanks with lots of armor. You can also make enough of them to make Space Marines, which is where a tank battalion is directly added to all your infantry divisions. Starting with a simple 38 light tank. This design is made for speed and soft attack, but you do enough hard attack so as to be able to fight enemy tank divisions in the early game. If you want to make something a bit stronger for more production cost, add a wet ammunition storage module and up the engines even more. It's important to remember you want to keep an eye on reliability when designing tanks. If it's lower than 100%, you will lose them quicker, hurting your reinforcements. Tank destroyers provide you with dedicated armor which focuses on high hard attack and piercing, allowing your divisions to pierce the enemy more effectively. They are not required, and if you can barely put out a few tanks, usually are not worth making, but the quality difference for your divisions is major. Always put a fraction of your factories in comparison on them to your regular tanks, and it's usually only one battalion in your divisions that will be TDs. They also will lower for your light tanks your overall speed most of the time, as it's hard to get the speed to match what you can do with light tanks. The reason you want to add dedicated tank destroyers is because the way your division stat for piercing is calculated is 40% based on the highest piercing value plus 60% of the overall average. This means that if you have a TD with a much higher piercing, its stat doesn't get lost in the average, but artificially bumps the whole division's piercing. The light AA tank is a dedicated anti-air tank, which when added to a tank division massively increases base anti-air, allowing you to move and fight when losing or equal in the air battle. Early on, it might be better to just put an anti-air support battalion on instead, but they will be much higher for AA overall. You can replace the armor upgrade with engines if you want them to keep up with your regular tanks, but the armor increase is a nice bonus. The 1940 light tank model is pure soft attack, though if you do want some more hard attack, you can replace the gun with the improved small cannon at the cost of more production and lower light attack. If you're intended to have more armor, this is a really good choice. This design and many others going forward include the Easy Maintenance module, which is the best extra tank module arguably overall, as it gives a reduction in total production cost and adds reliability, but it does cost 30 army XP to add to any of your designs, so it's a little expensive. The tank destroyer model uses the high velocity cannon for huge hard attack and piercing, and focuses on breakthrough a little bit as well. It's much more potent with its modules than the 38 and should be used when possible. The Dozer Blade module gives your whole division a bonus to max entrenchment, which only has to be on the TD models and is a pretty nice bonus. For the 1940 anti-air tank, you will likely not have the next level anti-air gun research, meaning it's fairly similar to the 38 model. Again, anti-air support modules, at least for light tank divisions, is a solid substitute unless you're fighting a dangerous air power like the UK, Germany, or Japan. 1942 tech and onward is when you really start to get access to the more potent modules and when AI and especially players will be fielding higher armored tanks, meaning piercing isn't optional. You need to be making tank destroyers for your divisions if you're fighting majors or in multiplayer. For the main light tank I'm still showing you is cost-effective options, because if you want real power, you honestly should be going for mediums. That being said, if you want to pimp the ride, replace your main cannon with the improved small cannon, and replace an ammo storage with a small cannon as well. Tank destroyers are able to use guns from a higher class tank, so for this TD, we'll use the improved high velocity cannon with the medium armament. Adjust this engine to match the speed of your light tank and add on armor in order to keep the reliability at least 86%, assuming you're using maintenance modules, if not 95%. The light AA tank for this period benefits from the tier 2 anti-air gun, increasing its AA by a good amount. Extra modules are optional, but aren't worth it generally. Medium tanks should be your first choice 95% of the time. If you're in multiplayer, basically always, unless you want to screw around. Due to the lower cost in heavies and much higher stats compared to light options, they are simply the best. They're also the most versatile in that you can make them fast, cheap, or just stat monsters. The basic 38 medium is the best for the early game and for wars you plan to rush. This model is an all-around tank with good stats across the board. It's worth mentioning here the most important tank stats, especially for mediums, are breakthrough, which simply put is your defense when attacking only, and piercing, which dictates if you can penetrate an enemy division's armor. Hard attack and soft attack are secondary, but very important. This version is what you want to make most of the time, but if you want a higher cost version, switch to small cannons and add road wheels, though it will be a lot slower. For your 38 tank destroyer, you'll be using a heavy gun with super fixed structure. Again, this gives you a great piercing bonus, so well worth adding. Not needed in 38, but the stat bonus is really useful, and if you're in multiplayer or doing achievements, it can be really helpful. In 1938, your anti-air tank is very simple, like the light version with somewhat better stats. Use this if you want to really min-max your divisions, and even add some armor modules and bonuses if you really desire, but again, it's not needed. You can just go with anti-air support battalions. The 1940 medium is what will define most of your important wars and be produced through the middle of the game. AI, and especially players, will be fielding solid armor, and as such, this design prioritizes hard attack and breakthrough to be able to push hard and effectively. You can strip some of the modules, engine and armor bonuses, and tracks if you want something cheaper, but quality is king for armor, so even if you only get a few divisions microing with, they're going to be really strong. The tank destroyers are really good with the modules available now. It also has very high hard attack, high piercing, and plenty of armor, while still having the speed to match your regular tanks. The AA variant puts out a lot of anti-air and is well worth going directly into division, as well as its good armor for increasing overall division stats. The 1940 tanks get better guns, but will likely not have the improved hull type, which I cover in the 44 modules, though if you get research bonuses and rush it, you absolutely should. A cheaper lower stat one would look like this if you're struggling for mills or want quantity rather than quality. For tank destroyers, you get a boost to stats due to the better main gun, and for anti-air, you get stat boosts from a few other modules as well. Lastly, we have the 1944 model, which is the best tanks you can make overall and for the late game. This is when even infantry from the AI will be having some solid hard attack and even anti-tank, as well as there simply being so many more troops on the lines to push through. Your main mediums in 44 have higher speed at 8 kilometers an hour alongside good hard attack, piercing, and armor. It's changeable but overall very effective. The tank destroyer with a new high velocity cannon puts out huge piercing and good stats across the board. And lastly, the anti-air tank gets another anti-air bonus from the new gun, making it even more effective. The quicker you get to the modules for these last designs, the better, and it's worth going ahead of time if necessary for the guns and hulls. Heavy tanks used to be the meta long ago, as their insane stats were too good to pass up on. With the changes to armor and with the addition of the designer and recent updates over the last year or two, they are now relegated to be more of a meme build, which is still pretty viable. Their cost is much higher and speed slower, but that doesn't mean they can't be a lot of fun. I don't recommend them for most multiplayer games or for achievement runs, but they are still very enjoyable. You will put out way less divisions than mediums and light, even with a solid factory base. As such, do not play overextended with them when you micro, as a loss of one division is much more disastrous. Do not make heavies early game. It's really unwise. The basic tank modules and hull is just really bad. Rush for the 1940 heavy if you're planning to go this route when you can, and work with the other techs. If you absolutely do need early heavy tanks for some reason, this is an alright division, but again, I really do not advise this. The 1940 model has massive armor and will never get pierced unless you're in a multiplayer game with sweaty players. It's got the piercing to push anything, but the big cost here is your really high production cost and extremely low speed. For your tank destroyers, you're using close to the same version with a little extra piercing, which is entirely optional. And your anti-air, which retains enough armor to keep your pierceability incredibly low in order to maintain a true tank division in the full sense of the phrase. Late game heavy tanks are where things get a little wild and very fun. You're still moving at the speed of a tractor, but the armor is even higher and your stats are generally better. This tank can suffer from being encircled, but if you push into heavily supported areas with a few of these, you're going to be really scary. Your tank destroyers get access to the best heavy gun in the game and put out ungodly amounts of piercing. The final heavy anti-air tank also gets the best modules and allow you to actually use tanks even when you lost the air war. Most games you will not use modern tanks. They are very late, but if you're doing achievements or just like the late game, they can be a lot of fun. Do know that they are a whole separate type of tank, meaning that you need the experience to make the armor designs and make the whole new divisions made up of modern tanks, which can be a lot, though for most folks you will have plenty of XP in the late game. They're faster, have much higher breakthrough in armor, as well as a higher hardness value, making them only really fightable from other tanks. This modern tank design is really fast while having the stats of almost a heavy tank. It's very expensive to make, but if you don't have a lot of mills at this point, it won't matter anyway. High piercing for that speed is wild, and it will melt everything. The tank destroyer has even higher piercing while retaining the speed to not slow down your regular tanks. Frankly, these are broken and almost out-pierce super heavies. I also do want to show you a solid super heavy tank design, which again is basically a meme, like super heavy battleships for Navy are fun as hell to use. It's obviously one you only want to put on heavy divisions. Flame tanks are used for the support battalion you put on divisions, giving you huge attack terrain bonuses. They're incredibly powerful, and if you really want a major boost to divisions or for achievements, make these. They should generally be as cheap as possible, but you can throw some armor on for a very moderate Space Marine style boost. Light flame tanks are cheaper to produce, but give less stats, so generally try to go for mediums unless you have a good reason not to or have very few mills. The light flame tank design gives a small entrenchment bonus, which is nice for the dozier blades, and a small bit of armor. It's cheap but very effective. The medium version is exactly the same but with engine upgrades that meet the 8 km an hour needed to not slow down almost any division. This concludes the armored design guide. If you want to see armored division templates alongside all other types you can basically want, check out the linked video here. I have a HOI4 tutorial series that covers all aspects of the game if you want to learn or simply get better. I'm Hammurabae, and I will catch you later.